One of the greatest stories of this NBA season has been the rise, or rather the revival of Kawhi Leonard. After years of injuries and questions about whether we'd ever see that version of Kawhi again, at 34 years old he looks different, sharper. He might actually be getting better. So how was this possible, and what's fueling this second prime? The selling point with Kawhi has always been his versatility. Even the best scorers in NBA history typically have some sort of flaw. While Kawhi's game has never been the flashiest or most explosive, it's almost like he was built in a lab to score the ball. That starts with his physical makeup. He's 6'7", which is just tall enough to rise over the top of most defenders without sacrificing his center of gravity. More importantly though, he's got an absurd 7'3" wingspan, and that length helps him get wherever he needs to go on the court with little to no wasted movements. We've seen big wings with long arms. That's not what makes him unique. What's different about Kawhi is that with all of that length, he doesn't sacrifice any ball security. Typically, wings with super long arms struggle to dribble through traffic or against added pressure. He thrives in those situations. It's simple yet sharp, effective, and most importantly, functional ball handling. He basically never picks the ball up too early, allowing him to get to his spots with ease. In addition to the size, length, and ball control, he might actually be the strongest wing scorer we've ever seen. The dude is built like a tank, so you can't bother him with physicality, and he can push around bigger defenders without much difficulty. Like the handle, this makes it really easy for him to get to his spots when attacking downhill or when playing with his back to the basket. You'd think that someone with this much size and power wouldn't be agile. You'd be wrong. He's always had a pretty explosive first step, and he can change speeds or directions on a whim, which makes him a constant threat to put pressure on the basket. As I said, it's like the guy was built in a lab to score the ball. You can't bother him with pressure, can't bother him with physicality. He's bigger, stronger, and quicker than pretty much any defender who stands in his way. Then the piece that pulls it all together is elite shot making from all three levels. Since he joined the Clippers in 2019, he's made 71% of his shots at the rim, 48% from mid-range, and 40% from three, all of which land in at least the 87th percentile. That shot making even goes back to before his days in LA, when he was a little bit more athletic. And the combination of everything I've talked about up until this point led to one of the greatest playoff scoring peaks we've ever seen. From 2017 to 2021, Kawhi played in 60 playoff games. During that stretch, he averaged about 29.5 points per game on over 63% true shooting. Only two other players in NBA history have reached both of those marks over any 60-game playoff span. Their names are LeBron James and Kevin Durant. In recent years, as he's battled lower leg injuries and aged, he's slowly tapered away from that level of constant scoring pressure. At 34 years old, he's naturally lost a bit of that burst and agility, but he's still moving really well, and he's gotten a bit stronger. What's really shifted during this time frame has been his role. Since 2022, the goal of the Clippers has been to keep Kawhi healthy for an entire season. That's it. He's so important to their team's success though that they couldn't just toss him to the sideline until the playoffs started. So what they did is they manufactured a new role for him that didn't really require nearly as much physical load. That started by going away from him as a primary initiator of the offense. Instead, they put him off ball as much as possible, operating a lot more as a spot-up shooter next to other creators like Westbrook or Harden. That led to 3 straight seasons, shooting over 41% from 3 but unlimited volume. When they did run offense through him, it typically started inside the arc. You'd often see him start near the baseline and come off of down screens for mid-range jumpers or post-ups. They wanted him using his strength to create space as opposed to quick twitch movements that strain the lower body. As a result of the shot-making prowess, he was still an incredibly efficient scorer, but it wasn't quite as prolific as in years prior. The shot creation wasn't what it was, he wasn't hitting the same sort of pressure points, and his free throw attempts basically got cut in half. Yet still, even in a more specialized role, his impact on LA's offense was overwhelming. So without skipping a beat, they went into this season with Kawhi playing a similar role. He was still primarily operating inside the arc and leading into his all-time great shot making. But the Clippers didn't have anywhere near the same success. Through 27 games, they had a bottom 10 offense and were 13th in the West with a record of 6-21. But after that 21st loss to OKC on December 18th, everything changed.
We discussed the evolution of my game and trying to get up 12 threes a game. So I give a credit to Coach Castleberry, we've been working on it. And, when I told T. Lou that I'm going to shoot 12 threes, he said, how? I said, it was probably about December. I was like, you're going to see.
At age 34, in the middle of the season, Kawhi just decided that he'd become a volume 3-point shooter. For years, he'd been a guy who'd consistently take about 5 threes a game. Now he's up to 7, and it's hard to describe how much of a difference it is for a guy to just add 2 3-pointers to his profile. But it's a pretty jarring shift on film because you can see the way he's hunting for these opportunities. Whether it's a pull-up 3 in transition, a tight window after creating some space in isolation, or a little bit of breathing room after coming off a screen, the guy's really just pulling any and everything. So Kawhi hasn't just added any threes to his arsenal, he's specifically added off the dribble threes. Before this season, he'd never taken even 3 pull-up triples a game. Now he's up to 4, which is the 15th most of any player. What makes the volume so important though is that he's automatic. Over the last 3 seasons, he's made more than 39% of his off the dribble threes, good for the 80th percentile. This season, he's at about 38%. The only players in the league who are exceeding both of his marks in volume and efficiency are Steph Curry and Jamal Murray. Not bad company. It's hard to overstate just how valuable it is for a player to increase his pull-up 3-point volume while maintaining high efficiency. Not only does it unlock a new portion of the floor for him to access as a creator, it completely rewrites how defenses have to approach the threat of his scoring and the amount of different ways he can apply pressure on the defense. As a result, the increased outside shooting has coincided with a change in his touches. Remember those off-screen actions I talked about? They've moved those to the perimeter so that he can free up for threes. And naturally, if he gets run off the line, he's got more space to attack with his live dribble, where he can still access those other spots on the floor. Speaking of which, he's also moved back into more of an on-ball role, and with that, pick and rolls have become a huge part of his arsenal for the first time in half a decade. Because he's looking for the pull-up 3, bigs are forced to step up and close that airspace. Not that it makes much of a difference when he's doing things like this, but in the event they are able to run him off the line, that's only his first pressure point. Between the masterful use of pace and ball security, he can get to his spots inside the arc whenever he wants. So a natural counter for most defenses to prevent both the pull-up 3 and the in-between game is to switch, only that allows him to work against a mismatch. When he's got space to get into his offense with a live dribble, that's when he's in his element. As the season's progressed, he's become more and more of an initiator for LA's offense. And now that Harden's gone, he's the initiator. A lot of these touches come in early, semi-transition situations, and like I said, the threat of the pull-up 3 changes how defenders have to react. He's on a constant hunt for the shot, but not to the extent where he isn't still taking what the defense gives him. Sometimes the only way to jump out to a shooter in transition is to cross-match, which takes me back to what I said about versatility, because there's something different he can go to against any type of defender. That's not just in transition. If it's a smaller matchup, he'll turn his back to the basket and win with his strength. If it's a big or a slower-footed wing, he'll play with a live dribble and win with his speed. If it's an undisciplined defender, well, he learned a few tricks from his friend James Harden. Not that he's actively looking to bait fouls, but he's figured out how to make defenders run into him, how to intentionally gather up through defenders' arms, and along with the added reps as a shot creator, that's led to a free throw resurgence. At his peak, he was good for 6 or 7 free throws, but as his role shifted, that tapered off, only getting to the line 3 times a game last year. Now he's back up to about 6.5, while hitting 91% of them. Fouling Kawhi is like giving up a fast break layup. But that's only a small chunk of his scoring. The reality is that he's painting the entire court with buckets in every way imaginable, and that prolificness is hitting new peaks. Since that Thunder game in mid-December, he's leading the NBA with an average of over 35 points every 75 possessions. As impressive as that is, it's the manner in which he's doing it that makes this run so special. Kawhi first entered that top tier of scoring talent during his last full year with San Antonio. That's when his improved shot making and ball handling skill met his peak athletic form, and it created a truly unguardable specimen. But as he continued to sharpen up the more skillful side of his game and how to pick apart different coverages, he built off of that season to create an all-time great multi-year scoring peak. Obviously, Kawhi was at his best in the playoffs, but during that regular season run, he was good for about 29 points and 2.5 turnovers per 75, with a true shooting percentage that was about 4 points better than league average. Over his last 24 games from this season, he's at 35 points with a similarly low number of turnovers, while shooting better at the rim, from mid-range, and from 3 for a true shooting percentage that's about 5 points above average. Naturally, that level of scoring has a pretty strong impact on the team's offense. Since December 20th, LA's had the 4th best offense in the NBA with a rating of 119. In terms of lineups, we aren't working with the biggest samples, but a clear trend has emerged. When Kawhi and Harden shared the floor, they were untouchable. That's about as good as it gets. It's the Kawhi solo minutes that stand out though, still producing an 84th percentile offense, while the Harden solo minutes weren't quite as successful. They were, however, a lot better than the brief time the Clippers played without either of them, so we'll have to see if Darius Garland and Ben Mathurin can pick up some of that slack moving forward. Either way, the level Kawhi's playing at in year 14, after everything he's dealt with, is kind of unfathomable. He could have easily been another what if, yet he molded his game in a way that helped him sustain his body, allowing him to hit new heights as a scorer at age 34. So say what you want about reliability, or if he'll be able to keep this up for the rest of the season. But one thing you can't deny is that he's not only playing at an MVP level right now, he's playing like one of the best small forwards in NBA history.